Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after, I would say, a bit of a heartbreaker for the Jets against the Boston Bruins. That game had the feeling of one of those kind of miracle Jets comebacks, even after they erased the 2-goal deficit to start the third period. Even after Boston scored, you got the feeling that they were going to make something happen and tie that game up late. Then a non-call. We'll debate the merits of whether that was a penalty against Josh Morrissey or not. He sure thought so. But non-call, Jets go from 6-on-4 to, with a chance to get back into the game, down 3-2 to down 4-2, and the game was over. I mean, I'll take a look at it like this, and I don't know exactly what the stats are. Ken said something to me. I think that shots were somewhere in the neighborhood of, 21-4 or something like that in that second period. I do know there was a point at which I believe the Jets had given up, I think it was 15 or 16 shots before the Jets got their first shot. I was actually blown away. It was interesting that the topic of conversation for so many days had been the Bronx cheer, because I was fully expecting a Bronx cheer after they scored there, especially after the Jets. Nate Schmidt talked about it today. Blake Wheeler talked about it post-game after the last game, how they said that it actually helped the Jets in that situation last game. So maybe that's what was needed tonight, was a Bronx cheer to get the Jets going after that. But here's the deal. Here's where the Jets are. They do not have the space, the margin of error to go to sleep for 10 minutes of a game, especially against a team like the Boston Bruins. So they did at the beginning of the last game that they played, and they got away with it against a very banged up Vegas team who is not the Vegas Golden Knights. It's, a pale imitation of them right now with all the players that they have out of their lineup. Got away with it that night. They didn't tonight. Now, did they erase that lead? Did they make it, anyone's game after that in the third period? They did, and we should give them credit for that. But the fact of the matter is, if the Jets had, not shown up, then maybe that, surge that they had in the third period would have created a 2-goal lead and not tied the game up. Put themselves into a hole. They couldn't quite dig themselves out of it. Good teams like the Boston Bruins seem to find a way. I thought that if you go back and take a look at that Taylor Hall goal with about 5 minutes left in the third period on the power play, kicks, in tight up against Hellebuyck, kicks the puck to a spot where he creates a better shooting lane for himself as he's falling with pressure from the defenseman from behind, and puts that puck in the net. That is a big-time goal at that time of the game. Very interesting. Before the game, Bruce Cassidy, I was in his avail. He'd said that the Boston Bruins were going to need to get in tight on the Jets. And that he thought they had ways of doing it. Now, I thought for the most part of that game, or for a lot of that game, the Jets did a fairly good job of keeping them to the outside. But where did those goals come from? I mean, Marchand's goal is right in tight. Frederick's goal is as in tight as you can possibly get. His stick is touching the post when he puts it in. And like we were saying, the third goal is, again, right in front of the net. So that was it. The story is the Boston Bruins knew they needed to get in tight. They did. They pulled it off. We can get to special teams and stuff like that, but I don't want to take too much off of Kenny's buffet plate here, because I know he's got a lot to say about the special teams in this game. So why don't we bring him in so he can have his say? Here's the guy with the best entry music in the business, although there's some competition. And let me just tell you, if you're feeling a little down, I think we've got something that's going to make you feel good. Stick around about 15, 20 minutes from now. We got something that's going to make you feel real nice. In the meantime, here's Kenny. Ken, my friend, great to see you as always. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, Sean, I'm tremendous. First day of spring training, I listened to a little Blue Jays baseball in the afternoon while doing a bit of work, and did manage to squeeze onto the ice at River Heights this afternoon before coming to the rink. So Gotta love it. That's a fun Friday, followed up by a entertaining hockey game, with the exception of the second period. Well, it was entertaining for the Bruins in the second period, but the Jets did a lot of chasing. But yeah, I mean, you touched on it at the initial trip to the buffet. There's no doubt that special teams were a major story in this hockey game, as was puck management. That's a topic that we have drilled down deep into this season. Cost them again. I think I'm interested. You played some defense, Sean, in your career. I know a lot of people were down on.
Call it a career. Let's move on.
Sorry, in your day, no matter what level. But actually, I think that on the odd man rush, Brendan Dillon's job is to pinch in that situation. The Jets' inability to have an F3 in that spot to help fill the lane is what led to the odd man rush and eventually to the goal. Dillon actually did keep the puck in from Jake DeBrusk, but Charlie Coyle pounced on the loose puck and then got it going north. And exceptional play by Jake DeBrusk to bat what was actually not a very good pass whatsoever from Brad Marchand, out of the air, going down to one knee and then getting it back over for the tap in. But man, what a play on that, one as well.
What a gorgeous play.
Lynette Reimer wondering if maybe Jake DeBrusk stayed in a hotel here this evening, and perhaps Andrew Kopp could be heading on a plane to Boston as well. But we'll get into that a bit later on. But I mean, impressive that the Jets bounced back. But yeah, you nailed it again. I mean, what a poor second period by the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, there's just no excuse for it. I mean, Boston is a great team. There's no doubt about that. But if the Jets want to be in this race, you can't get outshot 22-4 in a single period. There's just no way that you can allow that to happen and then not think that it's going to be a challenge in the hockey game. I mean, that's basically where the Jets have left themselves. And then, too, I mean, puck management, part of puck management, terrible luck that for Brendan Dillon that the puck rolls on its shoulder. But in that situation, it's a play that's got to be made. I mean, he wasn't under pressure. That's a puck that has to get out. I mean, nobody feels worse about it than Brendan Dillon, and it happens to anybody. But, I mean, that's incredibly costly penalty for the Winnipeg Jets. It's the one that, I mean, players say it all the time. Those are the ones you have to kill off for your teammate. But as you mentioned, getting to the hard areas and making the second effort to convert the play. Taylor Hall is falling to the ice in front. So, this is a time where the Jets actually, I mean, they didn't really fully get the box out, but they essentially were knocking their man to the ice, but that man still got to the puck, right? So if you don't have the guy's stick, I think I've shared this before. I had an assistant coach in junior. Barry Lewis said, you got to grab his gun. If you don't have the guy's stick checked, you don't have the player checked. And, that's the game winner. That's the difference. I mean, the Jets had tons of chances, but what happened was Taylor Hall fought through a check, got to the puck, and jammed it home. So that's the difference in the hockey game. Jets were 0 for 5 with the man advantage. Bruins only 1 for 4, but that one was the pivotal one. So to me, I mean, what we saw tonight is the epitome of the Jets season in a nutshell. The Boston Bruins are a team with a distinct identity, even when their best player is not in the hockey game. Their best player, Patrice Bergeron, their captain, their best two-way player, did not play. They did not deviate from their plan. They have a guy in Jake DeBrusk who stepped up into a top-line role, had an exceptional game, and then they did a great job of finishing off a team that is showing urgency, but also spotted them a 2-goal lead.
This entire idea of how the Boston Bruins played that game, I think you're entirely right. A couple things just popping into mind right when you're talking about that. The idea of Andrew Kopp going to the Bruins after seeing the Bruins makes a ton of sense, because if you take a look at this team, they're pretty good on D. I think they've got a little bit of a question mark in net. Their wings, they're
Swayman's
stocked.
Been good, though. Swayman's been good.
Swayman's been good, yeah. But on wing, they are stocked right up and down the lineup. But without Patrice Bergeron, are they ever thin down the middle? So a guy like Andrew Kopp walks in there, and then all of a sudden when you get Bergeron back, all of a sudden that team is looking pretty darn good. And you are right. We were sitting here talking about missed opportunities. I think the first 10 minutes of that second period was a huge missed opportunity. But boy, oh boy, with Bergeron out of the lineup, this is a guy who is so hard to play against. And yet, like, I don't know if there's ever been, Ken, in the history of the game, a guy who's got the potential to play as good and smotheringly defensively as Patrice Bergeron does, and yet produce offensively as well, for the first time. Holy smokes, he's a freaky.
Better late than never. Hey, better late than never. Game 62. Better late than never.
Yeah. But boy, oh boy, a missed opportunity with him out of the lineup. But I'm thinking more and more about what the interesting part about is what you saw from the Boston Bruins tonight was pretty much the same effort from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, right? I didn't think they had a lot of, like high peaks or low dips. I may have looked like a low dip at the beginning of that third period. No, I'll say this. They did look like they were skating in quicksand for a little bit in that third period, but I don't think it was like a complete drop off the map like what we saw from the Jets. This is, again, the stuff that drives Jets fans nuts about this Winnipeg Jets team and has for a number of years is they go out and they do what they did in that third period, and they're capable of doing that. And you look and you say, okay, just go do that. And, it's too much of an ask to it for a team to push that hard for the entire game, and it's not going to be possible. But I do wonder about, I think tonight what you saw was a Boston Bruins team that has, got results in the past and, has played this game for a long time where they have that consistent effort, and it's just the output is there from the beginning of the game to the end, where the Jets output night after night goes like this and like this and like that. And that's what we saw tonight. They were like this in the first 10 minutes of that second period. They were like this at the first 10 minutes of the third period. And you're thinking to yourself, what they're capable of, because when they hit their highs, they're so unbelievably capable, and you're just thinking, maybe just hit it that high more often. But I'm wondering, do you think this Jets team would be able to hit those highs like that without kind of falling asleep in a game? Do they need to conserve energy to hit those highs? They're such a hard team to figure out. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm baffled. I am admittedly baffled just at the way that they're able to look as good as they did at the beginning of the third period and as bad as they did at the beginning of the second period. And again, I'll say this, I know that the Jets came back and tied up that game, but without that second period start the way that they had it, I think the Jets probably win this game. So yeah, they look great when they're on top of their game, but man, when they're bad, they can look really, really bad. And there's just no room for them to do so at this time of the year right now.
No doubt, Sean. And again, so now we're back on the perplexing scale. We go from a game where the Jets put up 7. Yes, we know it's a depleted Vegas Golden Knights roster, but the Jets go back to putting up 7. I think it was I think my math has them down for 15 times where they scored 5 or more, but now they're up to 28 of 60 with 2 or fewer. Right? I mean, how does a team go feast or famine the way that the Jets have? It's unbelievable. And, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. I mean, to me, I think that the Jets got very little from their top, Mark Scheifele's line today. They got very little. One great burst from Blake Wheeler over the middle, which, interestingly enough, was the first shot of the second period. After, as you said, 15-0 the shots on goal. Blake with the vintage burst down the middle. Nice fake, goes to the backhand, doesn't score. There wasn't a Bronx cheer. There was a legit cheer because of the burst of energy. But that line, to me, had very little going tonight. Mark Scheifele, I mean, he had one-timer. At 5-on-5, I don't have Mark Scheifele down for one single dangerous opportunity. On a 4-on-4, Kyle Connor found him with a nice pass. It was in tight, but it wasn't a very good take by Scheifele. His body positioning wasn't in the right spot, and by the time he actually got to the puck, Ullmark had the whole side covered. So, I mean, it looked like it was a dangerous chance, but I didn't find... And Mark actually did a nice job of pushing off the defenseman to create the lane, but he didn't find the shot. I mean... Let's face it, Sean, the top line for the Jets, or one of their top 2 lines, was virtually invisible tonight. In a game where the Jets had to be great. They didn't have to be average. The Jets had to be great. And, I mean, I would also say that, I mean, both of the Jets' top lines weren't good enough, but you still saw the engagement. Dubois took 1 penalty, but he also drew a couple of penalties. So at least he was engaged that way, physically. Ehlers to Connor, or Connor to Ehlers, what a goal. It's just bizarre. Neither one of those lines really got a whole lot going. And that was, that's one of the reasons why they didn't get the job done. I mean, great play by Svechnikov, incredible toe drag, and what a tip by Lowry to get to 10 goals. But I just didn't see, I just didn't see enough from the Jets' best players tonight, except actually for Connor Hellebuyck, who he was the only reason it was a 2-goal game.
Right.
Sorry.
Agreed.
So to me, this was a night. We've talked a lot about Hellebuyck not being peak Hellebuyck. Well, Connor was excellent today, and he got no run support until the team was already down 2-0. So that's a game where the Jets let Connor Hellebuyck down. So, and in the other part too, I mean, Svechnikov, nice job. I thought that third line was okay. I mean, some people asking about Kopp. I actually thought that Kopp started the game quite well. He had a couple of really good scoring chances with that third line, which, again, was probably their best line, right? I mean, that was probably their best line in the hockey game. Gorgeous goal by Ehlers notwithstanding.
Yeah. You know what? Before we move on here, I just want to make sure that we thank our partners, the Johnston Group, who have joined us in our little escapade here, or whatever we would like to call it. Great group.
Good
who
word.
have been on board. And just wanted to say Johnston Group is a Winnipeg-owned and operated company that provides employee benefit solutions to companies from 1 employee to 10,000 or more. Over 30,000 Canadian businesses trust Johnston Group with their employee benefit needs through various products, including the Chambers Plan, Maximum Benefit, NUP. Johnston Group is a platinum member of Canada's best managed companies and named one of Manitoba's top employers. Whether you are a sole proprietor, part of a large organization, or an association with thousands of employees, Johnston Group has an employee benefits solution for you. And no doubt, they're just absolutely great people. Kenny, love dealing with them. So their products,
awesome.
The stuff that they do for people is absolutely phenomenal. Hey, before we go too far, I wanted to get into this comment. I don't know what Randall D's talking about here. I didn't see Cassidy's post-game comments. People in the chat room, if you could let us in on what, because I've seen a couple people refer to this, I wouldn't mind talking about that a little bit. Let's get into that at some point if we can. Other than that, let's talk about the Ehlers breakaway just quickly. Did you have a problem with it? I mean, I know we asked about him, and I think he'd said, is it true what he said in the post game that he's gone like 6 years without? Has he not been in a shootout in 6 years? That sounds preposterous.
I think he meant specifically to the penalty
in a
shot.
Game,
penalty shot. But I mean, he has not been a regular in the shootout because Nick Ehlers doesn't love breakaways. And honestly, on press row, I said Ehlers should go full clapper here, and I wasn't kidding when I said it. I mean, the people around me were kind of chuckling. They thought I was joking. I wasn't joking. Nikolai Ehlers doesn't love breakaways. There have been tons of times where he's had breakaways and gone in with speed. Today was not one of them. He tried to go. I mean, some people don't like it, but I mean, here's the thing, Sean. Ehlers is right. It didn't work on the penalty shot, but where do you think he beat him on the rush down the wing? Right through the wickets. So, I mean, maybe he fooled the goalie into thinking he can't dare try to go 5-hole again. I've already stopped him. But that's exactly what he did. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm sure Ehlers would prefer to go in with speed. But again, I mean, it was a situation where, I mean, I think that he should have, gone in with a little bit more speed. And, I personally, as a great lover of the slap shot, I think that Ehlers could have caught him kind of, sleeping if he had tried to, he's got a great shot. So, but again, I mean, Nikolai Ehlers knows what he's doing when it comes to goal scoring. So I'm always going to defer to Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah, I would say this. I mean, when you go in slow, we've seen guys go in slow before, and it kind of looks like, what the heck is this guy doing? And then they score. Then you're like, yeah, I knew he was going to score all along, right? Like, in situations like that, it didn't turn out well. He didn't have his best penalty shots. I mean, I don't know that him going in slow was what cost him. I think that he all of a sudden saw an opportunity, thought he was going to hit it, and I think he missed his mark. I think it was as simple as that. He tried for a shot and didn't get it, right? But I mean, if he hit the spot he was trying to hit, that puck very well goes in, and we're all talking about this differently. I don't take a look at this and think that Nick Ehlers is, although someone just talked about it, or Rob Mahoney says breakaways are Ehlers' kryptonite. Even Superman had a weakness. It is entirely true. Like, if you think for a while there, all those breakaways he was getting, he reminded me of Adam Lowry for a while, but Adam Lowry had the breakthrough and now seems to be able to score on the on the power play. But yeah, I don't know. I think people are being a little hard on Nick Ehlers, especially after he came back and scored in that game. And I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes it's a basically it strikes me as a 50-50 thing, right? You go down, it's you and the goaltender. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Wasn't his best effort that I've ever seen before, but I don't have the problem with it that most people seem to have a problem with it. I wanted to just jump back too quickly, and you were talking about that top line. I've had this conversation in the past before, and I was really watching for it tonight with this Boston Bruins team. The idea of the Jets loving to play this wide open style of hockey, and it's kind of hit me again with the point that you were making about how is this team going out and putting up 7-goal games and absolutely destroying teams and then turning around and having a hard time scoring. And tonight was a good example of, I've said this before, I think the Jets love to and want to, and I think that top line especially wants to play that wide open hockey. And here's an opportunity tonight where they're not provided with that opportunity to do that. The Boston Bruins were not falling for that. They weren't interested in going down that path. And the thing, I think the difference, in the game that you're talking about, I know you weren't high on that top line. I wasn't necessarily either. I thought at some point, I guess this is what the benefit of having Pierre-Luc Dubois on your line is, right? When he starts doing those things where you saw that play against Pasternak, where Pasternak has the puck, they come out of the zone, Pierre-Luc Dubois catches up to him, gets his shoulder in front of him, and then it's just like, who's stronger, right? And sure enough, he turns the puck over, and it goes from the Bruins having possession to being a long possession for the Jets in the Bruins' end. I thought that second line did eventually get to that, but I did think that the Jets came into this game, and especially in the second period, and for a good chunk of that game, they were looking for that wide open game that they love to play. And it's an interesting thing to me that, and I've said this before, I don't know if it's that the players are stubborn and it's just what they want to do. That's the kind of hockey that they want to play. Or I wonder if it's just in their DNA. And I've asked this question before. Is it in their DNA and it's just how the Jets are built, that that's the kind of hockey that they want to play and they're not overly interested, or maybe can't long-term play that grinding style that you see from Boston on a night like tonight over and over again. But I just thought it was a real example of,
why not? Why can't they play that style?
I mean, I don't know. Like I always liken it to this. I think this is a good example, Ken. If I go back, and I'm going to go back a ways here, and maybe some of our younger viewers won't pick up on this as much, but I always took a look at a team like the New Jersey Devils. Remember that one year they won and they had Alexander McGillney on their team, right?
Yeah.
And the Devils would go out and they would grind and they would make, and it was never Alexander McGillney going out and getting, you're down 2-1. And it was never him scoring the game-tying goal. And usually it wasn't him scoring the game winner either. But if you were up 3-2, he'd go and get goals 4 and 5, which would break the game open and allow you to win it. But I contend, go back and watch those teams. Alexander McGillney never played New Jersey Devils hockey, or the style of, I guess that's what New Jersey Devils hockey is now. Watch out for that team, because they're an interesting team to watch and play. But Alexander McGillney, yes, but Alexander McGillney never played that style, but he was useful on that team because there was a whole bunch of players around him who played that style, and then he would jump into the breach and go in and score goals, right? Well, maybe, to the point I'm trying to make here, maybe a lot of the players are those jump into the breach type players, and maybe the balance is off. Maybe they've got too many jump into the breach type players who want to, take off the work that is being done around them and go allow their skill to come to the forefront. And maybe there's just not quite enough of the balances being off. That would be my suggestion. I don't, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, because can it be that this team, for as many years as it has, returns time and time again to the high flying, high scoring, overpassing the puck, looking for that, gorgeous one-timer, but then, when they don't get it, they just pass, like we saw on the power play tonight. Wasn't surprised to see that on the power play, because that's this is the direction that game is heading, and they're looking for that style of hockey. I honestly wonder if the balance isn't off, and there is not enough of the players who can play that style consistently for 82 or 70 games a year. But boy, oh boy, if a team comes in and they're not ready to play and they decide to open up the game against you, you will absolutely torch them.
Well, I mean, one quick thing. I mean, McGillney had 43 goals and 83 points in 75 games, and I'm pretty sure not all of them were insurance goals. And then in the playoffs, he had 16 points in 25 games. 16 points in 25 games. I mean, that's not a ton, but I mean, he was a dynamic player.
Useful for them. He was highly useful for them because he added an element of skill that they didn't necessarily have.
Oh yeah,
take advantage of those moments. But he was never a bought-in member of the New Jersey Devils. Let's go out there and grind and trap and shut things down. I mean, like he was a gazelle in bull's clothing. But you could use it every once in a while.
Which is why he only stayed, I think he was traded there the 1 year, and then he had the one full season, then went to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then just had the brief time with the Devils during the coming out of the lockout, I think 2005, 2006, the last NHL team he played with. I understand your point just fine, Sean, but this is my biggest problem. This is my biggest problem. When the Jets had their most success, they had no trouble buying in to playing a defensive structure. Now, again, there were some times where that structure was loose.
When are we talking here? Give me.
When they went to 2018 final. I mean, the Jets, when they went to the Western Conference final, they were committed. So I know it's hard to be committed, but I mean, the Bruins don't have trouble committing. That's how they play almost every single game, which is why they're effective. So, I mean, this is very simple. You either get the players to buy in, or you get different players, right? I think this is, I mean, again, simple is maybe not the right word, because it's not easy to change the complexion of the roster. But, I mean, PLD is bought into the system.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so was Adam Lowry. I mean, there's plenty of guys that are okay with trying to do that, but the puck management is the bigger issue. I mean, do the Jets need to do a better job of protecting the slot? Of course. They also need to do a better job of not throwing pucks blindly into the middle or turning the puck over at either blue line. I mean, that's not systemic. That's basic hockey. I mean, but the Jets seem to have a lot of self-inflicted wounds, and that to me is what hurts them. So, I mean, I think they should. I mean, again, we'll get into the trade deadline more, but I mean, I think that they need to change a couple pieces of the roster, and I agree with you. I think they need to change the composition to a degree, and I think part of that they're going to have to change the composition because Andrew Kopp is not going to be back next season, and Paul Stastny is unlikely to come back next season either. And one quick thing, there's sort of a slight detour on the way to the buffet. I loved Kopp's honesty at the podium on Thursday. It was incredible. First speaking so freely about his concussion or worrying about whether or not he had a concussion. And I love the fact that he mentioned that he wanted to buy and he was looking to buy a house in Winnipeg, because this is another thing we've talked about. One of the things that was special about Jets 1.0 were that people spent the offseason here. Some people bought houses here. Some people stayed here. That hasn't been happening with as much regularity. We know there's some guys who've committed to the city and made long-term deals. But Andrew Kopp wanted to be here. And this is what I reported at the end of last year, Sean. Andrew Kopp wanted to be here. But when the Jets chose to sign Neil Pionk to a long-term deal, and then they went out and got 2 defensemen, there was not money for him to sign here. So to me, that's a missed opportunity. Now again, were they bang on the money? Obviously not. But this was a player who wanted to be part of the leadership group, wanted to put down roots here, sign a 5-year deal, and that's certainly not going to happen. But I get it. I mean, the Jets want to both buy and sell. I get it, but I think they're going to again. And I'm not just saying because they lost to the Boston Bruins, and I get it. Starting with the string of games of these 5 games, they're against non-playoff teams. So could the Jets rip off 5 in a row? Maybe. But guess what? They haven't ripped off 3 in a row since early January. So unless you're going to win 5 in a row, it's going to be awfully difficult for the Jets to make the playoffs, which is why they have to at least listen to the offers that are for those players in Andrew Kopp and Paul Stastny, and then sort of retool on the fly. I think what I've said from the beginning, the Jets just can't get draft picks. They need players in their middle 6 forward group that can help them both now and in the future to try and extend their window.
Okay, we're gonna
We
dig
got a
into
big
this a little more.
big news
I made a promise at the beginning of this show. I know people are a little bit down after that loss. I know I can feel it. I can feel your angst out there, and I promise something that is going to cheer up your day. And you know what? It's the thing that always cheers up your day on this show. It's when Jeff Hamilton shows up into the show. But I've said this in the past. Kenny's got the best entry music in the business. Well, Hammer just tossed his hat into the race. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bring in the hammer.
Bring in the hammer! Dropping two bombs, dodging shot grenades! Hammer! Move over, get someone else who's not so bumpy! I'm gonna make Renny shout, and the show will overtime! Bring down the hammer!
I'm blushing.
Wow.
I'm sweaty now too. I feel like this is a career milestone moment. This is like a remember where you were when this happened. Holy smoke.
big news.
Hilarious.
Big.
I want to swear, but I know you guys are, corporate run here. So it's
Family show, buddy. Family show.
So, just so everybody knows, the great Tristan Rivers, who is the man behind Sean's headband, the man behind Enter Kenny, is the man behind that as well. These things just show up in my inbox.
Tremendous.
And then I rock out for days to them. I sent this to Hammy a couple of days ago because we got to get a video component to it put together. And Jeff tells me he's been listening to it every morning when he gets up in the morning, like punching at the mirror and getting all pumped up for the day.
I go outside to it. Now I can leave my place with confidence.
So I got to make sure that we get this in there. The video as put together, which I absolutely love. I thought the editing of the part where move over Kenny, someone else is in the buffet, and we got the gift of Ken with his eyes popping.
You need a plate. You got to get a plate in there.
It was phenomenal. It was really well done. That is my camera guy, Colin Jensen, and Steve Anderson, a shooter and an editor at City TV, who worked on that, put that together today.
Incredible.
Absolutely phenomenal job. Loved that. Absolutely loved it. So now we got entry music. I said this before. This is interesting. Well, we'll get into.
Let Hammy tackle that. Right.
Well, let's start it right now.
Right after the song. Yeah, let's tackle it.
Team, says Corey Kolchinsky. What are they going to look like without two leaders like Kopp and Stastny?
Broken, man. I mean, maybe broken's harsh. Maybe but not good. Thanks, Colin. You're left with the question, like, is this team any good? Like, you know what I mean? Like we know they're good, or we know they can be good. It's just, you look at those second periods and the second period this evening, but you look at second periods throughout the season, or the difference is the Jets don't lull for minutes. They lull for long stretches, like to the point where it's just like, then they claw themselves back into it. So credit there in the third period for sure. But to answer that question, I don't know. You can't take one guy out of the lineup in this team and it not be some kind of drastic movement. So to lose two guys, especially when you consider, like, Paul Stasty's having a pretty good year. Paul Stasty's also a calming presence in the locker room. He's a guy that puts things into perspective. He's Matt Hendricks, but with skill. You know what I mean? Like, he's a guy who a lot of guys lean on, the older guys, the younger guys. Like, he's involved. He brings not even a lightness. Lightness isn't the word. He brings a bit of an honest perspective to things. So he would be a big loss. And of course, Andrew Kopp. I mean, anyone else on this team play all three phases? I guess Kyle Connor does. But I mean, he's a massive piece too. And we saw, with him being out, they look like they're, I mean, just think about it. With those two guys, say they get dealt, and there's a chance that both might get dealt, one might get dealt, whatever, none might get dealt. But if they both get dealt, is this team not like an injury away from completely collapsing? Like, they need to be kind of perfect in the health department if they lose two guys like that. So, because, I mean, they've just shown over and over again they can't make up those losses. So, that would be a tough deal. But here's the thing. I'm sticking with my original thought. I know there's some buzz out there that they might trade for players. I think they do nothing. But hey, maybe they do something. That's just my gut feeling. And if they do something, what's interesting is if they do something, it's like, wow, another splashy move, which I'm not saying wouldn't be intelligent, but another splashy move after a splashy summer. I don't know.
So Ken, I want you to give because I'm very fascinated in what you think is going to happen here. And Kevin Cheveldayoff in the broadcast did sound as though he plans to be busy here, so he's going to try to do something. Give us an idea of what you think he's trying to pull off here.
Well, I think Andrew Kopp is going to be traded to either the Boston Bruins or the Colorado Avalanche, especially if the Avalanche don't win the Claude Giroux sweepstakes. I think that the Boston Bruins are going to make a substantial offer. And just a quick detour again for those folks wondering if Jake DeBrusk has no trade protection, so he would be in play. But again, I also agree with someone else in the chat room who said, why would the Bruins trade him? I mean, Jake DeBrusk, when he's going like he is right now, is a very effective player, and it's more likely he would be moved in the offseason. And
that's what I was thinking.
Bruins are not going...
a career milestone. Did he not tune in?
Sorry? Oh,
sorry.
Sorry. And the other part, too, I mean, would the Bruins be a better cup contender with DeBrusk and Kopp in the lineup? Of course they would. That would help their team. But so if DeBrusk is probably more likely to be an off-season kind of maneuver for Don Sweeney. But I think that Kopp is going to be on the move. I think it would be, obviously there's going to be a loss for the Jets, but given what the marketplace is showing right now, I don't think the Jets can afford to not get the assets back for an Andrew Kopp based on where they are, whether they're in the standings or not. And I do agree. I think there are some incredibly high financial implications for the Winnipeg Jets if they stay in this race and if they can somehow squeeze into the playoffs and get 2 or more playoff gates. That pays for one of those players. But I think that the offers for Kopp are going to be too good to ignore. When it comes to Paul Stastny, if the Jets can trade Paul Stastny for some draft capital and turn that draft capital into somebody like Dominik Kubalik, I think they'd have to consider it because he would provide some secondary scoring. It's been a tough year for him, but he's a guy that scored goals at this level. So that's what I could see them doing. I could see in some ways then you become a buyer and a seller, which is incredibly tough to do, but the marketplace will dictate what those moves are. I mean, Jeff, could you be right? Of course. I mean, could the Jets just say, we're not punting on the season, we're going, not all in, but all in terms of keeping those players as self-rentals, for lack of a better term? Of course they could. They know their team is better with Andrew Kopp and Paul Stastny in the lineup, but the only way for them to extend the window without trading draft capital is to move players who are not going to be with them next season. Now, again, Kevin Cheveldayoff did also mention, which really kind of caught my attention, both you guys, he talked about the potential of moving prospects. Now, What does that mean?
Yeah.
I don't think it means moving Ville Heinola, and I've said that from the beginning, but does that mean you're interested in potentially moving, I don't know, whether it's Dylan Sandberg or Declan Chisholm or one of those guys?
You don't think Ville Heinola could be on the chopping block?
No,
I do. I think the team thinks Sandberg's ahead of him in the depth chart. So if that's the case, and if he's getting calls, as a first rounder, I could definitely see him being gone. I'm not saying he will be gone.
Without giving him a run to see if he's actually, could grow into a first pairing defenseman.
What do you get from Dylan Sandberg? Like, is he a toss in for another pick like Kopp? Like, is he because what do you think Dylan Sandberg's value is right now?
Depends on who's been watching him at the American League.
Well, that's what I mean. People like him in Winnipeg and stuff, but okay, they like him. He's playing in the AHL. Like, what's his value as a trade piece at this point in time? You know what I mean? Like, he would be a toss-in. No one is going, I want Dylan.
I wouldn't say
Sandberg.
that.
Okay.
If he has top 4 potential, that top four defenseman.
Top 4 potential.
Sorry, second pairing. When he was up in the NHL, Jeff, he was playing on the Jets' second pairing.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that statement. But what does second pairing potential get you on the trade market?
Well, that's again. So if the Wild are looking at potentially trading Jack McBain, a 6'4" centerman, who was a 3rd-round pick, do the Jets look at their surplus of defensemen and try to bring in a 6'4" centerman that could help them both in the short term and the long term? And now, again, I'm not saying Sandberg is that guy, but I wonder if instead of just the ask, according to Jeff Merrick, was a 2nd-round pick. Would the Wild be more interested in a prospect that can jump into their lineup than a pick, a second rounder that the Jets don't have. So, I mean, those are the conversations that would be interesting to me. Again, it's one thing to say it. I mean, now you got to go out and deliver, right? I mean, isn't that the big thing? I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff is under some pressure to deliver a couple of these moves, and now it's up to him to make something happen.
You know, this might mean nothing, but don't you think there's a little bit of pressure here on Sunday? Like, if they lose to Chicago, do you think that's not like, okay, this team's not going to make it? You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be in Chicago. Chicago's not a good team,
right?
But they're capable of winning. Do you think that could possibly tip the scales? I mean, obviously it's going to hurt them in the standings, but do you think that could tip the scales, you know, the day before, you know, a 3 p.m. or whatever it is deadline the next day? Like, I think if they lose to Chicago, they've lost all trust. You know what I mean? Like, whatever trust exists, I could see them being like, you know, we're going to trade for sure, and both of them.
For sure.
So,
and one quick one. I just want to answer that question on Lawson Crouse. Lawson Crouse is a pending UFA, so no, the Jets should not trade for Lawson Crouse. If they want to sign him in the offseason, you know, fill your boots, but that's not the kind of guy the Jets are looking for in the middle six.
I want you to answer that question that he just asked, though. Like, what does a loss against Chicago on Sunday do to this team at this stage, Ken?
Well, I mean, they need a 5-game winning streak. They're playing 5, I think, non-playoff opponents. So if you lose one of those games and also lost Friday to Boston, I mean, by then, conceivably, the Jets could be 6 points or more out of the playoffs. So does that sink their chances? No. But, I mean, you certainly should be treading lightly if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff. I mean, they were 2-2 with, 5 minutes left in the game? That's a game that has to get to overtime, right? I mean, good teams, really good teams, get that game to overtime. And what we saw tonight, teams that are kind of on the periphery, I mean, you can't even call the Bruins an elite team, but they've been one of the best teams since the All-Star break. Those teams find a way to win, just like Boston did in the last meeting against Winnipeg when the Jets had, you know, some good signs. They gave up a third period, one-timer, power play goal to David Pastrnak. I mean, those good teams find a way to win. And what have we seen this season? The Jets haven't found enough ways to win those games against good teams.
So here's the deal. If you take a look at the numbers, the way they stand, the game against Chicago should be inconsequential, to be honest. Like, if you need to wait for that game to decide what is going to be happening, it doesn't make sense because we've already talked about it. The Jets basically now have about room for 5 more losses. If you take a look down, they've got 20 games. Like you said, 13 of those games are against, somewhat shaky teams, right? So there's potential there. But 7 of them are against really, really good teams. A lot of them who down the stretch are going to need to be jockeying for position. So they're going to roll in to Florida, and they're going to have to play Florida, and then they're going to roll in and they're going to have to play Tampa Bay, who's probably going to be playing a much different brand of hockey by that point. They know what they need to do. They need to shape up. New York is another one. So there's a bunch of those teams.
That same trip.
Carolina, that same trip.
Rangers and Panthers.
That is a 4-game trip right there. Is the Tampa, Florida, Carolina, and New York.
So now let's just say out of those 7 games, let's say they managed to, take 4 of those games, right? Well, they have 3 losses. That means now the rest of this stretch, it sounds, promising because you're playing a bunch of teams that aren't the best teams. You play the Buffalo Sabres in there. You're going to roll. You play Ottawa twice. You play Vegas one more time right now. They're broken. You go play the Montreal Canadiens.
Buffalo
again.
hasn't been horrible.
Buffalo hasn't been horrible, but the fact of the matter is, like, even against bad teams, things go wrong. We've seen this before, and it's almost like you have to play perfect against those teams. You have to play perfect.
Well, and that's what makes it tough. Sean, but that's what about Sunday. It's not that they're waiting for Sunday. I'm suggesting if they don't win on Sunday, whatever. I don't
think it changes anything.
Yeah,
it should.
It shouldn't.
If it changes something, that's crazy because it shouldn't. Because the odds of them missing the playoffs don't get that much crazier by them losing that one game. The odds are already crazy. So if they lose that game and it's like, well, now it's time to throw everything out, that just sounds crazy to me. Ken, you haven't got something to say?
No, but if the goal is to bring in middle 6 players with term, you're right in that it doesn't change what happens Sunday.
Exactly.
That's you're starting the process of reconstructing the roster that is not in a place that can go on and win 4 rounds. So I think if you can get a jump, I'm not saying do it just to do it. If you can get a head start on the process of changing the complexion of the roster, they have to do it. Now, whether we call it buying or selling or whatever, I mean, only Kevin Cheveldayoff can determine that. But, I mean, they can't buy without selling those two players because they don't have any cap room. Unless you're going out and making a bigger deal that includes someone like Mark Scheifele, which we don't think is going to happen until at least the summer.
No. And so that's just it. Is there's, I guess, so I know what you're saying here, Kenny. And T. Will says this: why would a team trade a roster player for a rental? Seems counterintuitive. That's not what Kenny is suggesting they're trying to do. He's suggesting that basically what Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to try and do is he's going to take the guys who are unrestricted free agents, who he's going to lose at the end of the season, and move them out to bring in guys that he's not going to lose. He's trying to play the old switcheroo and basically turn Andrew Kopp into the same player, but one that has term, right? Now, it sounds brilliant. It does. And if he pulls it off, it will be brilliant. And you know what? What he pulled off in the summertime, when he went out in that defenseman market, which was absolutely insane, and it looked like the Jets were going to have to go out and dip their toe in and overpay a defenseman to get him in, to bring in Brendan Dillon the way he did with cost assurance and him locked up for the 3 years in the window as this team sees it. If you're looking at the, at the time, I think they were looking at the Hellebuyck, Scheifele, and Wheeler window. That was brilliant. Nate Schmidt, same thing. That was brilliant. So if he pulls this off, it's absolutely phenomenal. But I don't think it's easy to pull off. And let's just say it like this. Who's pulled this off before, Ken? Can you think of someone in this position who's gone and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take all our risk and unload it on someone else and then turn it into no risk and be the exact same team we were before the trade deadline started? Have you ever seen anyone pull this off before?
Well, I mean, teams would try it all the time. And so the point, T. Will, is that if you're a team that thinks you can win the Stanley Cup and you think that Andrew Kopp for 2.5 months is a safer bet than a guy who's in his first or second season, that's why you make the trade. You're trying to get your name engraved on the cup. I mean, is it a great long-term play? No, but only one team wins. So, I mean, we've used this example before, and I mean, he's not a second-year player, but if the Tampa Bay Lightning think that Andrew Kopp can help them in a way that Matthew Joseph can't because he's an elite penalty killer, that's why teams and general managers make those kind of moves. And when teams like Tampa Bay go out and get Brandon Hagel, now if you're Florida and you're in their division, now Florida might think, well, you know what, Claude Giroux might be great, but they already have offense. So maybe Andrew Kopp's a better bet for them than Owen Tippett would be, who's playing in Springfield of the American Hockey League. So, I mean, that's where you have to be, potentially looking in terms of doing those things. Now, again, is it easy to do in a cap world where there's, flat cap and most teams are into LTIR or right up against it? Of course it's not easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. But
that's what I'm saying. Is this would be something if it was easy? Never mind easy to pull off. If it was, I don't know, semi-difficult to pull it off, you'd see it happening all the time. Like, this is the same problem teams face year after year. Teams that miss the playoffs run into this problem year after year and can't unload guys who are UFAs for the fact that they're going to lose them for nothing. This happens every single year, and yet I'm telling you right now, and Jeff, I'll ask you, because I don't think that Ken thinks he's seen it before, but have you ever seen that pulled off where a team took all the players it was going to lose, traded them away, turned it around, and turned it into basically the exact same players, locked up with cost assurance going forward? Like, I'm telling you right now, I've never seen this happen before.
I can't think of one example that a team has traded their depreciating assets, their expiring contracts, and have essentially been sellers, but buyers at the same time.
Yeah.
And improve, to ditch stuff. But I'm not saying I just can't point to anything. I just can't think of a situation where you sell off 2 pending UFAs, and then you get players back, and not only have you replaced those players' caliber, but you've also got cost assurance for years to come. Like, I don't know. That would be a great move in Chevy's reputation for this year. I guess I would suggest, because
I'm going to say
I don't know, unless you have two, the only situation I can think of that you would want to get rid of players with term or other players that might be an RFA, so you might have their rights. You know what I mean? But I can't think of a really good player that you could like. Who's taking? Like, I guess we'd have to look at teams that even have that example. Like, is there ones like, are we looking at like who are the examples?
This is what I'm saying. Every single year, teams deal with unrestricted free agents that they know they're going to lose at the end of the year and they're not going to get anything back. So that's what the Jets are trying to avoid. And Ken, like, I love it, and I like the idea of what he's trying to do. I just I think that the opportunity to try and do what Kevin Cheveldayoff says he's going to try and do here exists for almost every single team, or at least half the teams in the league, every single year. So if this was something that was like, we would say, here, they're buyers, this team are buyers, this team are sellers. There's never really been an in-between before that I can really think of and remember. Right now, Kevin Cheveldayoff has proclaimed that that's what they're going to be. He's that, I don't want to say mushy middle, this is the razor-sharp middle. If he is able to walk that tightrope, of like, thread so thin it's like floss, and pull off moving guys, getting a bunch of assets and turning it back into real assets and staying in the fight and keeping it, giving his team a spark down the stretch here. This, to me, will be one of the most interesting cases of GMing that we have ever seen at the trade deadline before.
For sure. But the one thing the Jets can do, and I mean, it's probably not all that palatable to the ownership group, but they can retain money. So if you can retain money, that helps a team get a middle six player like Andrew Kopp or Paul Stastny. That also makes it more appealing, especially if there are desperate general managers in those markets, right? I mean, someone has to want to overpay, right?
Before you go on, how do they retain money and then bring in a long-term player who's going to be good right now that fits under that salary structure?
So, Sean, no problem. I mean, you're not bringing in a guy that's on a 5-year deal at $5 million. You're bringing in guys who are pending RFAs that don't cost as much now, and that you have team control over, but you don't necessarily have them locked in. The Brandon Hagel is a great example. Locked in for 3 years at 1.5. So people are going all crazy. How are you giving up 2 first-rounders? Well, here's the thing. Julian Brisebois is looking at Brandon Hagel as a sure thing. And on a team that is top-heavy, you need a guy who can be a middle six forward that's locked in at 1.5, isn't going to arbitration, and isn't going to cost you $5 million the next year. So
he's their new Barclay Goodrow.
But he's not physical. So the thing with him is, though, that so if that pick is 30th to 32nd, Brisebois doesn't care. That guy's not a guarantee. That's a lottery pick. And again, Brandon Hagel there is a betting component on it. He only has one 20-goal season. So what if this is as good as Brandon Hagel is? The scouts for the Lightning believe he's only getting better. That's why you make that bet. But I mean, Sean, I'm not here saying it's an easy. The tightrope is definitely there, and there's no net right now below the tightrope. So you better have pretty good balance going into this. And this is poker hand. There is no doubt that this is straight up poker. And who's going to blink first?
And that's the interesting part about this, because to pull this off, essentially you got to move the guys out first and then bring guys in, right? And I'm not saying that Chevy can't strike a deal to bring a certain player in and tell that GM, okay, hold it right there, I'll get back to you, and then start working the phones and go that way. But this is, is there not at least risk? And I'll ask you, Jeff, if your idea is to move out Stastny and move out Kopp, gather those assets and use those assets to go and get Dominic Kubalik, we'll say, just to put a name on a player, isn't there a risk in that you sell and then you go to buy, and then if something falls through, then you've become sellers, which here's the interesting part about this. Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I'll ask you, Jeff, if you agree with me, don't you think Kevin Cheveldayoff has shown with his comments this entire time leading up to the trade deadline, and with his comments in the broadcast today, that he is loath to be looked at as a seller come Monday?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't know.
Well, he is not coming anywhere near. I believe in this team. We've got a shot.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Say that again.
I said he's also been known to kind of surprise, where you don't think he's gonna pull through on something, and then something happens. So maybe, it's an odd. His words today were odd because he's not usually that forthcoming. So it almost makes you think he's got something in the,
in the hopper.
something happening, right? Like
In the hopper, yeah.
And here's the other part. Why is he doing this? Like, why is he talking? He never talks. Like, is he contractually obligated to go out and talk about the deadline on TSN? He's not. So, like, that's another, I don't know if that's, necessarily a tip or whatever, but something
but maybe it's this. Maybe
trying to raise the prices.
Maybe he's just hanging the flag out there, right?
Well, no,
he just went out during the broadcast and said to any other general manager that's listening, not that he can't do it, behind the phone, but like any scout, any organization, he's just gone out there and said, hey, we're willing to move guys if you're willing to move guys back to us. So what he wants is he wants other GMs.
The phones. He's got to do it on national TV or.
Well, you can. I mean, listen. Hey, look, put it this way, Jeff. He is loath to say things in the media at all times. He likes to do his business on the phone, right, behind the scenes. So if he's doing it up front and center, why would he do it? He clearly believes that putting stuff into the media has consequences or gets some kind of result, or at least gets people talking. Yeah. So if now all of a sudden he's out there putting it into the media, I think he's saying, okay, let's put this out there. And now if there's anyone out there who says, okay, I think the Jets are going to move Andrew Kopp and Stastny, collect a whole bunch of picks, and then maybe if Hagel got, 2 first, maybe the Jets are going to get a little bit of a stash here. And he also says, which he never says in the past, that we'd be willing to move a prospect or something like that.
So he's that's the part that I think we're understating here.
If you've got someone that fits what we are looking for, a middle six forward right now, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get picks for you, and we've got prospects you can pick from. So if you've got a guy who you think, we're hanging up the for sale sign, make offers. If you've got guys that you think are going to fit that, we're interested in hearing from you. That's what I think that's about.
I think Ville Heinola is a play. I think more and more I think about it, and I think about where he sits in this team and where he sits in the depth chart, and, I think he could be at play because I also think he's a guy that other teams will look at and be like, we like him. They've seen what he's done. He has an upside, offensive upside at the AHL level. He's registered some games. Who else could they be talking about as far as prospects? I mean, Dylan Sandberg possibly, but if you're looking at prospects here, is he not your best one? And is that not the guy that NHL teams would come looking for and ask?
But for a middle six forward?
No, I'm not saying alone him. Maybe it's Ville Heinola and a pick or something. You know what I mean? Like if you're talking about obtaining assets, what do you think Stastny can get? Like what do you think Stastny warrants? A 4th round pick?
Oh, I'd say higher. I bet you could get a 2nd round for him. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, man.
To Ken's point, I mean, the thing that makes Hagel so attractive and why he goes for so much, I think everyone's eyes kind of blew open. But Ken's got it right. It's the cost assurance that they get with him.
Say it's a 2nd, just for argument's sake.
Sure.
So then do you have Ville Heinola and a 2nd for a middle six?
Well, so Ken, you help us make sense of this, because to do the kind of things that he's talking about and to move prospects like he's talking about, but to say the interest is in middle six forward, that in itself almost doesn't make sense to me, because you've got your first 2 lines basically penciled in, unless you're trying to move Stastny and get a guy who can step in for Stastny. But, if Perfetti ever gets back, he's a guy who could play in those roles there. So essentially I just don't I'm not understanding the need for a middle six player at this moment right now that would, I guess otherwise, unless you're moving those 2 players.
You need him to replace those players, whether you're replacing them now or in the off season. So that's why you need those roles to be filled. And yes, Cole Perfetti should play one of those roles, but the only other guy that would be close is David Gustafsson.
Gustafsson, exactly.
So again, that Gustafsson can help minimize the loss of Kopp, but you're looking to add offense, which is why Kubalik makes sense if you're banking on. You're not even having to bank on Kubalik being a 30-goal guy. You could have him be a 20-goal guy, but you can't have him be an 11-goal guy. That's the issue. And for me, there's not a hope in where that Ville Heinola is being moved for a middle six forward. He has the potential to be a top pairing defenseman. He's not right now, but he just turned 21 years old. So could I see him being part of a bigger deal? Sure, but you better be getting a legit scorer, not just a middle six guy, but he's got to be a top 6 guy in that scenario for me. But, again, could he be in play? Of course, but I think he is the would be the limited part to be in play, and you would have to be blown away. I mean, why you'd want to make it publicly is the same reason the Jets wanted it. I mean, we didn't get the information from the Jets last year, but of course if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and you're trying to retool your blue line, of course you want it known that you're in on Matthias Ekholm and that you're in on Jamie Alexiak, because that shows you're trying to make the team better, right? I mean, even though he wants to do his business privately, of course he wants that out there, that he's trying to get his team better, even when he wasn't able to pull the trigger on those deals because the price tag was too high, right? I mean, for a rental in the one case of Alexiak and Ekholm, I mean, obviously both those guys stayed because they were both in the playoff race, and that was the way that they chose. And for Dallas, they lost a lot. We're talking about losing guys for nothing. Well, Dallas never made the playoffs, and they lost Alexiak for nothing. I mean, that's just the way that it goes sometimes.
Guys, I want to, because we're an hour in, and I want to get this topic of conversation in here because I want your takes on it. So Blake Wheeler gets his first penalty of the game. And when he's in the box, one, he gives the ref a look on the way in, and then he gives him the thumbs up, right? Like the fake thumbs up, basically razzing him for the call that he made. And I noticed that the ref made his way over to talk to him. And so whatever had happened there, it was enough that the ref took notice and went and opened up the door and talked to him. Pierre-Luc Dubois went in and chirped the ref pretty hard after his penalty. Stan went in, slashed the boards with his stick afterwards. That call at the end of the and I'm going to ask you this first, Jeff, that call at the end of the game where they do not call, you could call it missed call, I want your opinion on whether you thought it was a penalty or not, on Josh Morrissey, that does not go the Jets' way. Do you think the way that the Jets had reacted to almost every penalty they had in that game played a role in how that game was officiated down the stretch?
It's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't think so. I think it's one of those, they're already down a guy. Do they put him down another guy? And to be honest with you, you look at that play, and I think it depends on which team you're cheering for. I think there's an argument on both sides.
I think it's a 50-50 play. I think it could have gone either way.
I think it's one of those, it's to me, he certainly extends his leg, so it's clear, but it's in a tighter thing. And I just think that, I think if you're a Jets fan, you have an argument to make.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you do. But it's just also one of those things where it's just, I don't know. It's not even it's not a close call thing in the sense that if that happens in the first or second period or early in the third or midway through the third,
it's called.
It's called.
So then it's a penalty.
So I'm not disagreeing that it being a penalty. I'm just not surprised.
Agreed.
In the way that it wasn't called, given the circumstances of the game. And do you think that Morrissey played a little into it? Do you think
I do.
Do you think he sold it because he threw his stick?
Well, here's what I'm saying. I'll tell you why. Okay, so and Ken, I think
he's in a tight position there, in a bad position.
You said that you think it's a penalty basically by saying if it was earlier in the game, it would have been called.
Absolutely.
Here's why I think the refs didn't call it. I think the refs see that as incidental contact, and this is why. Foligno doesn't move into the boards. Foligno is in that spot. Sorry, Coyle. Coyle is in that spot right off the bat, and his stick is there. Now you're right, he moves his foot a little bit, but Josh Morrissey is trying to squeeze through a tight area and go over a stick that is there, that Charlie already has that spot. And so what he's trying to do is he's trying to sneak through a hole, and in doing so gets tied up with the player's stick. Now, this is why I'm saying I think it's 50-50. I think that call can go either way. So I don't think it's a bad call if they called it a penalty, but I don't think it's a bad call if they don't call it a penalty, because I think that Coyle was there. He was in that spot. It was a tight spot that Josh Morrissey tried to get through, and he didn't get through. The fact that he ends up tripping over a stick that is there already with a player who is in that position, then he's trying to slip through a tight spot. He didn't get through, and so I can see why the refs would think that was incidental contact in that situation. I just wonder though about I had been watching throughout the game. It seemed like, and I had watched the response of the Bruins players as they were going to the penalty box for theirs. There was a definite, at every point tonight that the Jets got a penalty, other than Brendan Dillon's, they absolutely gave it to the refs when they got called.
So did Holla, though. Holla also, I think it was both ways.
I just
But worse for the Jets. No, Sean, your point is well taken. I mean, this is not as bad as it was.
I don't think you can tee off I don't think three guys can tee off at the refs and make it absolutely known without a doubt that they think that was a BS call. I don't think you can expect calls late in the game after you hang out the refs like that.
I definitely think that plays into it. The refs are like that.
Sensitive.
Yeah,
I mean, everyone's human here, right? But I mean, they were on every single one of those calls. They got shown up by the Jets players, and so at a critical moment in the game, right at the very end of the game, and this is why I say this: if it's a 50-50 call, and I believe it was, and I haven't been looking at the chat room, and people may be teeing off on me for this, but if it's a 50-50 call and you've been riding the refs all game, I don't think you can be overly surprised if that call doesn't come.
No, and Jeff's right. I mean, if they're not shorthanded, that's a play that probably is called to make a team shorthanded. But in order for it to be a two-man disadvantage in the final minute, it's Hudson Bay rules. I mean, it's got to be blatant. It's got to be a blatantly obvious scoring chance. Otherwise, it's not called. I mean, this is not news. This is not breaking news. The Jets are disappointed in it, sure, but I mean, let's also, you can't take the Jets off the hook. They're 0 for 5 on the power play. They had two very good ones, but they had a couple other ones where they didn't have any puck movement whatsoever. And then, like what we talked about before, Sean, they stayed on for the whole 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that was something we could have got into, and I think we've run out of time on it. But the way that the power play on a night like that, where it is not going, and you've got, there's a couple times that first power play unit heads down the puck and picks up the puck with less than a minute left on the clock, and it's like, why are they not at the bench at this stage? I mean, again, we've said this before. To me, it's almost a respect thing for the next unit, right? Like, we didn't get it. It's 2 minutes. A minute has gone by. We didn't get it in there. We respect you and believe in you enough that we want you to hop on. We want to give you a chance to go win this for the team. We've talked about this, and this has been the case over the years, but I just thought on a night like tonight, that showed up when the power play was not running. Last thoughts for either of you?
This is a good question by Sandy. Are we going to try to do a show Monday night, or what's our?
We ran into this last year.
We were working
the issue with it, unless so I'll throw an idea that would potentially work if we wanted to do a long Kenny and Renny where we just kind of stayed on, and if people like Jeff or Mike McIntyre, Scotty, yourself, myself, we're interested in kind of keeping the lights on as everyone has to walk away and work, it could work, right? But we know this from last year, Ken, that we get calls out of the blue and they need you to be up and running on live TV at this point. So we have to be nimble enough that we can walk away and do our jobs, everybody. And in order to do that, I think the only way you can do that is even if you pull 5-6 guys together to do that throughout the day. So I mean,
we got to do it at night. We got to do it at night, like after, well after stories are filed and whatever.
If you want to do it something afterwards, I mean, we could go up and talk about it. I don't know.
I'm in Chicago, so maybe something happens this weekend.
There you go.
Yeah, could be. Anyways,
could be Sunday. One quick one. It was a bad penalty by Wheeler. I mean, there's nothing to argue. He slashed DeBrusque on the hands.
Well, and this is what I'm saying.
At a play, when he was going to go off and change, he took 2 strides and then slashed him.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Well, and again, so this is the way I see it. I mean, I get it when people are upset, but like, if this is the way I see it. If you're going to argue a call, especially to the point where you're like, giving the guy the, nice call kind of thing. If you're going to argue that call, maybe you should make sure it's a bad call first, right? It should be the kind of call where you look at the ref and you can kind of see in his eyes he doesn't make eye contact or whatever because he's not quite sure if he got the call right. And it should be one of those. I just thought on a night where they gave it to the refs for every single call that was made. I don't know if it played a role in that very last call. I wouldn't be surprised.
You can say it certainly didn't help them.
For sure. Sorry, one thing. Sorry, Mr. Turd Ferguson. Krause is an RFA, not a UFA. My apologies, but it sounds like Arizona may be interested in keeping him. Would he make sense for the Jets? Of course, but those are the guys that cost big dollars. So we'll see what happens there.
Okay, we're going to shut it down here before we go any further. Before we do, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube page, please do that. That would help us a lot. It just allows us to get our stuff to you quicker. Like our videos if you can. Go watch our last long form. Oh, Sean's headband shirt is on.
Merch.
I'll get to the merch. I just wanted to say we were surprised at the numbers for our Sheldon Kennedy show. We would have thought it would have got more. It was great content. It's going to be there. It'll make sense for a long time. If you haven't checked out our long form shows, please do us a favor and go just check it out, because the one with John Shannon was such an interesting look in TV, and one of the guys who's the architect of hockey as you know it and as you see it on TV right now.
That was an interesting one.
John Shannon was really, really interesting. And as Kenny said, because he's constantly trying to do my job, now he's put up this comment, which is going to be in the way of this. If you can bring that comment down, that would be helpful, Ken. If you are interested in our merch, the Sean's headband shirt that you just saw Jeff wearing, K&R shirts or Wake Up shirts. We've got Wake Up mugs, K&R water bottles. We've got everything you need there. Really appreciate the support you've been giving us. But if you're interested in getting more, www.shopsportsnet.store. And that's it for us. Great job in the chat room as usual, everybody. We really appreciate it. And it's going to be an interesting one Sunday and Monday after that. So let's get at it. We'd love it if you join us. We will see you after the game in Chicago on Sunday.